Hey everyone, welcome to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast for end of March, beginning of April 2023. I am Pete Chianca, here as always with my fellow Pet Peeves cartoonist, Dave London. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Pete.
Feeling like spring to you at all? We are actually recording this on the first day of spring.
It is. In fact, it's, no more snow. I think it's going to hit 50s today, get up to 60s later this week. So,
All right, we'll take it. We'll take it. I'm going to look. Yeah, I have a little snow left outside here. I'm up in the snow belt up here in northern Mass, so it takes a little longer for it to melt up here.
right, the hinterlands of the mountains of
Yes,
Cape
basically.
Ann up there. Right.
Basically. I feel at home with nature up here. But yeah, looking forward to spring, looking forward to everything that holds. We have a few events coming up in the near future, including, I'm not sure when you all are listening to this podcast, but if it's before March 25th, you have an opportunity to run down to Somerville, Massachusetts, Union Square, the Bow Market Book Fair, where we will be with our Pet Peeves books, talking to folks coming out there. And our old stomping grounds, we lived in Somerville quite some time ago. Remember that, Dave?
Back when it was affordable. Yeah. And if I was going to say, and if you're listening to this after March 25th, you just have to use a time machine.
Right, exactly. Yes, Dave and we went to school in Medford / Somerville, and then lived in Somerville afterwards. And I remember when I had to get out of my lease a little bit early in one of my last Somerville apartment, because I was getting married, and they said they practically did a dance of joy when I asked to get it out, because they knew how much
You were
more.
against married people. No married people can live in this.
Yes, yes, they discriminated against married people. My wife to be didn't want to live in a decrepit Somerville apartment, believe it or not. I don't know why, but yeah, they knew they could get so much more for it, and it's just gone up exponentially. But anyway, and there's another even bigger comics related event that you hope to be at. What's that one?
So let me sure I get my date correct here. So April 22nd and 23rd, Wicked Comic Con in Boston. So that
Yeah,
is,
that's a
I
biggie.
think, one of the larger Boston comic related events. And so Pet Peeves will hopefully have a presence at the National Cartoonist Society table at that, where we'll be shopping our wares.
Yes, National Cartoon Society, of which you are a member.
Of which I'm a member, which is why they don't, look at me weird when I try to sit at their table. Exactly.
Right, in good standing even.
Yeah, I pay my dues, so that helps.
That works. Excellent. So people, please try to get out to see those. Today on the podcast we have Jimmy Craig, who is the very funny person behind the They Can Talk comics, which we'll talk about later. Elsewhere, though, in the comics world, there's a big news story that, a lot of times things that happen in the comics world don't really leave the comics world. Fellow cartoonists know about some of these things, or people who follow the industry. But this was what I'd call a front page news. Well beyond that was the sort of banishment of Scott Adams, creator of Dilbert, from pretty much everywhere over the last month or so.
Yeah, I think he's off the grid completely now, off the sort of general populace grid with he kind of stepped in his own doo-doo, I think is probably the technical word.
Well, yeah, and anybody who's been paying a little bit of attention knows he's gone sort of increasingly more and more extreme. He was a big Trump supporter, and yeah, he had a lot of very controversial, shall we say, takes on race relations, and seemed to just trying to, stir the pot to the point where people couldn't ignore him anymore. And that certainly happened with this last batch that got him kicked out of basically newspapers, his distributor, and everywhere else.
Yeah, I think what I read was, I think he's going to have sort of an online presence for people willing to pay for a dedicated Scott Adams website to read Gilbert going forward, and that's about it. But I mean, as people I think are aware, when he first came out, now this goes back 20-25 years ago, I mean, his strip was unbelievably popular and funny.
and funny. I mean, I don't feel like this is somebody who I was like, oh, I had this guy's number from day one. I mean, I got a huge kick out of Dilbert, and he was doing this sort of brand of office humor. I kind of have it in my mind with Office Space, that movie. It was that era of, sort of this satirical look at the workplace, and it fit right in with that style. And it was funny. I had one of the book collections. I still have it on my shelf here from many years ago, and the thought of him sort of going off the deep end is disturbing to me.
Yeah, I've never met the man, but I've only sort of read about him online. But yeah, it is disturbing that, somebody who we read and we thought we looked, highly upon for his strip. I think he was always considered a great writer. People sort of looked at his drawing ability as less than sort of stellar, but his writing was top notch, certainly, and making fun of office management and bosses and CEOs and so on. So it's look, he made his bed, right? What's the phrase? He made his bed, now he has to sleep in it.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing, people decry cancel culture, but this is absolutely not what I would call this. I mean, he cancels himself by, for all intents and purposes. And people, and this is not a subject to deal lightly with these days. I know a lot of the newspapers, we have a newspaper here in Massachusetts that actually, they dropped Dilbert and they left the space blank for a month. You're going to leave it blank to the end of March to sort of protest racism and remind people that it's still a big problem. So also that means they don't have to pay for another strip during that time. Newspapers, they're struggling a little bit too. So it's a sort of a win-win there for that one.
Anyways, moving on.
Moving on, so we felt necessary to at least mention that, and I don't think there's much else in the way of big news, so I think we can take a very short break and come back with Jimmy Craig. How does that sound?
Sounds great to me.
Very good. All right, stay tuned. In less than 30 seconds, Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. We'll be back. Hey everyone, welcome back to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast with me, Pete Chianca, and my co-host, Dave London. It's time to introduce our special guest for the month. Jimmy Craig is the creator of They Can Talk, the comic series about animals that has been a runaway hit online. His work has been published by The New Yorker, Reader's Digest, Hallmark, and Woodman Stern Publications. And his new book, Are You Gonna Eat That?, collects more than 100 of his favorite They Can Talk comics. Jimmy currently works as a story artist for Illumination. They're known for Secret Life of Pets 2 and the Despicable Me franchise. You probably saw at least one of those. And he lives in the greater Boston area with his wife, 2 kids, and no big surprise here, 2 cats. Welcome, Jimmy Craig, to Strip Search.
Hi, great to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad you could join us today. So as you know, or maybe you don't, Dave and I are also Boston people. So we'll talk a little bit about Boston later. But first, I have to ask you about sort of the origins of your animal mind meld. I mean, reading these comics, this is somebody who has somehow managed to, be a Dr. Dolittle type in terms of actually letting us know what these animals are thinking. So were you a zookeeper in a past life? How did this all start?
I really have always loved animals. Like my parents as a kid used to joke that like I would just live on a farm and have a bunch of animals. But the comic, actually, the first like iteration of the comic, when I like decided I want to do something long term, and start chipping away at a comic project. The first idea was doing inanimate objects and like having inanimate objects talking. And I drew a couple of them and I felt like it was just like going to be a struggle, long term. And then when I thought to do animals, it was just so easy. Just like it was so easy to come up with ideas and it was fun. And I also was like, I try to always somewhat base them in reality. And even if like an animal's eating, I'll like try to read about like what those animals eat, like what trees these animals habitat is in, and like all that stuff is interesting to me too. So none of the comic felt like work for me, basically.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started in cartooning. I guess it's really a
Sure.
2 or 3 part question. There's how you originally got started in cartooning,
Yeah.
but then jumping into how the They Can Talk book first came about.
Sure. So I really grew up on like the classic cartoon strips, comic strips like The Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes and Mother Goose and Grimm, and a little later on Monty. I was really a fan of, but really Calvin and Hobbes, like I was obsessed with from like super young. Same thing with The Far Side too, and those were really like just from my dad and my nana was really exposed to those like since a young age. I always like joke and say that I would like copy the strips before I even like understood the humor.
Yeah.
So I've just always been surrounded by comic strips, I feel like my whole life. My first kind of attempt at making one, I always would draw, like I was always, you know, a doodler in school and always drawing stuff. And in college, a couple friends and I started a comic strip that was more college adult oriented, that ran in a bunch of like university papers. And we ended up doing comics for like crack.com and College Humor and sites like that. And when that fizzled out, focused on kind of different things. A couple years later, when I was like, I missed doing a comic. It's just something I've always wanted to do. Like without my plan was really like I just wanted a book, like a collection of my comics. Like I have so many comic collections on my shelf that I was like, and I go to bookstores and like that's the first thing I run to and like I look at, and I was like, I just had that long-term goal that I was like, you know, I want to feel like I want to chip away at that over time. And then when I decided to do that, like I said, the first iteration of it was inanimate objects. I never posted one. Then I was like, I'm gonna do animals. I posted my first comic and it was like instant, like I knew right away that like this was the path to go. I could do this long term and I would enjoy doing it. So that was about over 7 years ago now, that I did the first comic. And I was
I have
like,
to ask, who started the first comic? Which animal?
it was actually a chicken. And it's not like it's thankfully like I can look back on my early comics and not I think like they've improved a lot. Like I don't think the first comic was great by any means. But like it was a chicken that was like the sun was, I'm gonna now explain to you one of my horror comics, but the sun was rising and oh no, I'm sorry, it was a rooster, and the rooster saying like, what is that? And he's like yelling at the sun. And it was like, what is the rooster actually saying when we hear the rooster crow in the morning? I think it would have made more sense to have the rooster complaining that it was morning. But anyways, like I said, things have improved since then. But I just could tell from the first comic that like people enjoyed it. I got an instant response from it. And like I was probably 4 or 5 comics deep into it when it was like, oh wow, like not only do people like this, like I think this like might do really well. I think one of my first ones was a shark, someone in like a diving cage, and the shark is like trying to rescue the person, and obviously like it's scaring the person because the shark is attacking the cage. But anyways, it was just really quick, and I was like, I'm gonna do one a week. That's it. Very small commitment, but I'm gonna stick to that schedule. And like for 7 years now, I've done it for, you know, some weeks for better or for worse, but I think really sticking to that, you know, just committing to it for this long has, you know, helped me get kind of to the point that I'm at now.
Pete and I can appreciate the sticking to the commitment. We made the same deal as well. Unfortunately, we decided we were doing 3 times a week. So but there's 2 of us. So
Yeah.
And in terms of the book, so this is your second book, right? The one that's coming out right now?
Yes, it just came out. This is the second one. First one was, I'll say it was a little premature. I think that I didn't have as deep of a catalog to pull from for the book. And this one, I'm just like, I felt like the comic as a whole was at a much better place. And I'm like so proud of this collection because I just had a deeper catalog to pull from, where I was like, you know, some of those weeks, maybe you guys can relate, where you're like, you kind of just gotta put an idea
That
out.
deadline is looming, even if it's
Yeah.
self-imposed, it's looming.
Yeah,
can you
I
hold
like
it
it. I like that pressure of having to do it, but sometimes the comic suffers because of it.
Can you hold up the book? And I know you
Sure.
pulled it up earlier. Some of
Yeah.
our viewers are actual viewers and some are just on audio, but for people who are actually watching this on
Sure
video.
thing. So it's a hardcover book called Are You Gonna Eat That? And this is a collection. It's got about 100 to 130 maybe comics in it. And yeah, it came out great. I'm really happy with how it looks, how it feels, all those weird book things that make us book people happy. Like I feel like I got what I wanted, and it came out really nice.
Yeah, I read it. It's really, besides being hilarious, I mean, it's an awesome quality book. Like it has some
Thanks.
heft to it.
Yeah.
And the paper's nice, and it's just definitely one for the collection. And I was going to ask, so it's from the entire run of the strip, as it's not just drawn from ones you've drawn since the last book.
Nope. It's primarily ones that aren't in the first book. The first book, maybe 10 comics that overlap. Aside from that, those were like the fan favorites from that made the first book, made it in the second book. But primarily it's new comics since those last, I don't know what, maybe 4 years worth of stuff. But just trying to pull ones that, did the best online, that, sold the best as prints, and then the ones that were just my personal favorites was kind of how I picked what went in the book.
So on your personal favorites, do you have one there, sort of makes you chuckle? It's like you wrote it, you drew it, but it makes you chuckle.
I do. One actually comes to mind because I was thinking, I told my wife the book was sitting on the counter, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I've read through it straight since it was a PDF. So I read through it, and I was like, oh, this one comic, I was like, I remember writing it in now I'm not gonna be able to find it. I know what it is. It's a squirrel comic, which I usually try to write about animals that I have observed, that I have and I feel like they're common enough where people already have their own thoughts about these animals, especially cats and dogs, where I can kind of use people's preconceived ideas, with my comic. But this comic in particular was my favorite just because I'll tell you kind of how I wrote it. But it's squirrels, and the first squirrel says, sparrows just make the most beautiful music. The other squirrel says, I actually find it derivative and predictable. And the squirrel says, I prefer the scratching sounds of burrowing animals, underground stuff. So I remember writing this comic, and the idea was just I want squirrels talking about birds, like they're music critics, and they're hearing the birds chirping and they're hearing the birds' songs. And I was like, that's what I think is a clever idea. The birds are talking about the squirrels are talking about birds like they're music critics. And I had nothing beyond that. And then when I usually sketch my ideas in a sketchbook, and then the underground animals and having it be relating to underground music, that part came after I sat on the idea, and I was like, oh, that works so perfectly. And I was like, it wasn't even the joke I was looking for. It just kind of fell in my lap, which never happens. So that's why that idea always jumps out to me, because I remember it's people will I'm sure ask you guys too, oh, do ideas come to you just in your sleep or while you're going throughout your day? And it's no, I have to be very intentional about digging for those ideas. But sometimes those are very rare instances, an idea will just kind of fall in your lap. And that was one.
And it is nice if you have the luxury to sit with it for a while and sort of let it percolate, because sometimes, very often, if that deadline is looming, you'll go with the first thing that comes to mind, and a week later you're like, oh, why didn't I think of this at the time? But that's the good thing. Then when you put it in a book, you can rewrite it. We do that a lot.
Totally.
A lot with ours. In our little partnership, I do the writing and Dave does the drawing. So so obviously, because I am not a visual artist, I tend to go for punchlines that are word based. But one thing I love about yours is how often you're able to pull off a really funny punchline that's an expression. There's not a
Yeah.
word to be found in that last panel, but it's the eyes or the mouth, just that conveys the joke. How hard is that to pull off? And I know a lot of people try it. I don't see it
Yeah.
very often.
I would say I definitely am similar to you where I like my first instinct is dialogue. And what I will always do is I write a dialogue heavy joke and then I like keep chipping away at it until it's absolute bare bones. And if I can do it with no words, like best case scenario, doesn't always happen, but like usually, like one that comes to mind was a pigeon asking for directions and the person just throws seed at the pigeon and the pigeon is standing there like covered in bird seed. And I had the pigeon saying like, thanks or something like that. And I was like, not only does this work without dialogue, I think it's better without dialogue. So I would say that most of those comics usually do have dialogue in their they're in the rough draft. But I always like will start erasing dialogue. And if it works, then I don't put it back.
That's really interesting. I was wondering about that. And I think that's one of the appeals of, it has a feeling, a web comic feel in that it's very wry, and it's very, more so than sometimes an old fashioned newspaper comic, which I feel it's harder to get away sometimes with something. I don't know if edgy is the word, but it just takes a little more creativity, I think, on the part of the reader. And I think the way you approach that really nails it.
Thanks.
So as Pete alluded to, he's the writer half of the duo, and I will admit that the writing I think is the more important part. But as the artist side, as the artist side, I always ask all our guests materials. What do you use to draw? Did you start out one way and move to another? Some people are old school all the way through. Some people have more migrated to electronic usage. Just tell us everything about what materials you use, and feel free to get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I am old school in the sense that I will always I have stacks of notebooks here too. Just like I get the absolute cheapest sketchbooks on Amazon, and every single comic will start as a really rough sketch. And I have really sloppy handwriting, but I always tell people, like, if someone finds my sketchbook somewhere, if I like leave it in a coffee shop or something, that they won't be able to decipher it. So it's intentional. It's like my code, but they always start as like as a sketch in a sketchbook. And then like I'll work out all the dialogue and like the basic framing, and then I go digital, where I have I don't know if you can see it here, but I have a Wacom tablet. But I always prefer to draw on paper, just like I haven't been able to go from paper to digital. Like, I don't scan it or take pictures of it. I just use it as a reference. Then I draw it from scratch digitally.
Photoshop?
And in Photoshop, yeah. I've tried like, leaving Photoshop, but they got me hooked, and I'm forever a subscriber, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a drug pusher, right? They get you, they start you out, and then yank you in with the monthly fee now.
Yeah. It's unfortunately it seems to be the standard now with subscription, everything. But what works great too is like I won't always be sitting at my desk with my desktop, and I have a Wacom One display tablet for my laptop, and I really alternate almost every other comic with which tablet it's drawn on. But Photoshop, like I can edit, I can use the cloud, so like I can go between computers and just not be stuck at the same desk, because I really like to I don't know, switch it up.
Yeah, no, that's the benefit of being able to migrate from one platform to another as you move to different rooms, or portability, even if you need to draw outside the house.
Yeah. So I've used the Wacom tablets, though, have been awesome. So I don't think like while I do prefer paper, like drawing digitally is like Wacom, I guess, has made it easy for people who do prefer paper.
I know Dave sends me a lot of cartoons that he draws while he's on vacation, which probably
Yeah.
wouldn't happen if he had to bring his drawing board and paper and ink with him into the woods of Maine.
Yeah,
They wouldn't
I
let
do
them
bring my
across
laptop.
security.
I do always have a sketchbook with me no matter where I go because I'm like you know, it's usually not a like fully fleshed out comic that I'll get an idea for, but just like a loose idea that I need to write down physically on paper for that idea to like stick and then to like, you know, sit on that idea and see if it will turn into a comic. But it's always like having to be very intentional about like sitting down and now it's time to write one. But a notebook is usually what goes with me on vacation or to the mechanic or get coffee or wherever I go.
Right. Now, just to take a little detour away from the comics for a second, what I didn't realize until I was doing research for this interview is that you're a story artist for Illumination, which is, you know, on the film side of things. So what does that entail? And sort of how, I guess, how did you get into that and how does that work?
Sure. So I've been, excuse me, doing work for Illumination now for I think almost 6 years, 5 or 6 years. And my animal comic, They Can Talk, the exposure from that comic got me an opportunity to do punch-up gags for Secret Life of Pets 2. Because it was like, oh, this person writes animal jokes. So I was doing gag writing for that movie. And then since then, I've just been put on different projects and it's primarily like gags and punch ups where, you know, I get a scene and then I just submit a bunch of, I mean, it's basically doing comic strips, but for, you know, for specific scenes and specific setups. And it's been awesome. It's been like, I can't believe it's been that long, even saying it out loud, that many years. But I've always wanted to do something in animation. And, you know, I was like always pursuing projects similar to that. And it was really like, it was the comic that opened those doors. And since then it's opened more opportunities like that. And Illumination's been really awesome. So I'm now, this is like, I've been working on the Despicable Me franchise now for over 2 years, which is on that specific movie, which has been just awesome.
So do you see minions in your sleep, basically?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, my wife is like, it's funny how she's just like, I will just say random ideas and she's like, anytime I enter a room, she's like assuming it's gonna be like a cat, dog, an animal, a cat joke, a dog joke, or like a minion joke, and she's just like waiting for it and has gotten used to it at this point.
Yes, I think the spouse of a cartoonist, it's you know, it's a tough life.
Yeah. I like like I said, why I also do it on paper is like I will do a rough version of a comic and show my wife. And I'm like, I always tell her, I was like, I don't care if you think it's funny. I just want you to tell me what the joke is. I just want to make sure the joke is clear because I know it's going to be harder to make her laugh. But I was like, that's not the part I'm looking for. I just want to know if you get the joke.
Right. Does this even make sense?
Yes. That's verbatim what I say half the time. Does this even make sense? Exactly.
Like I think Gary Larson needed to do that more often with his wife if he had one. There's still a few Far Sides even to this day that I don't get, but most of them were brilliant.
Yeah, I'm looking at my Far Side calendar on my desk right now.
That sort of leads into a question I wanted to ask you. Some people talk about the New Yorker cartoons and how sometimes they're not quite clear what they're getting. And I know that in your bio, it talks about being published in the New Yorker. So I just wanted to ask you about that. What is that?
So I love New Yorker cartoons. And I'm a big fan of a bunch of New Yorker cartoonists. And I just wanted to, you know, add it to my resume. And not so much add it to my resume, like I just wanted to do it for myself, like to prove to myself that I could do it. And I submitted a couple of you know, ideas. I got sold my first one then the next round I sold another one, and I was like, wow, this is easy. And then I, went through a period of not selling any. But it was just always something that, like, I mean, basically similar with Farside, like single panel cartoons, I just always loved, and maybe even prefer over the animal comics. Like, I just had, especially after doing They Can Talk for so long, it was just like, I'm not gonna say I painted myself in a corner, because like obviously there's so much I can do with animals still, and I don't feel like the well is dry by any means, but it was just nice to do what I really wanted to do with single panel comics was just do stuff that was like more absurd humor. And I specifically wanted to draw like more creatures and stuff like that. And so I just started putting these comics online too. And then, submitting some to the New Yorker, just publishing some online. And I actually just did my 100th post, I think last week, of my single panel cartoons. And while, the New Yorker has been cool, it's not like They Can Talk is still my main comic, but like it's been really nice to have this other creative outlet, and people people seem to really be enjoying it too. So I have no plans to slow that down, but it's really just been another outlet that's been fun to do.
That's fantastic. And while we're on the concept of cities, New York, you're a Boston guy, so this leads into, Pete alluded earlier, where we, like you, are Boston guys, but have you found that the Boston environs have made its way into any of your work at all? If so, how? Or any Boston stories to share?
Like, I think that the biggest thing of being from this area is kind of like the like sarcasm and attitude, maybe like pessimism, that I think is like different than maybe working with people on the West Coast. Or it's just like, I actually have people tell me a lot that like I have a very British sense of humor. And I'm like, I don't know if that's because it's like dry, but I think the like more sarcastic, like almost dark humor that I try, like it comes through maybe one every 5 or 10 comics. I think that's very like New England to me. But as far as like, I don't make the settings like anything recognizable to the Boston area or anything like that, but I do typically the animals are like mammals and pets and stuff that you'd see in New England. I occasionally will do like different types of wildlife, but primarily it's a lot of cats and dogs, but birds and mammals that are like here and observable animals that I have seen. I'm not, right. I'm saying this as I just wrote like a lion comic, but I'd say those ones are very rare.
I have to, yeah, sometimes when I'm reading it, for some reason, I'm picturing Maine. I don't know why. Yeah. Maybe because Maine is kind of an oddball state, and these are kind of like oddball animals.
Yeah,
but,
I don't know.
For some reason that it feels that way to me sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's definitely New England, just as far as the wildlife. But yeah, no, I've been in Massachusetts my whole life, aside from one brief year in LA. But aside from that, I've stuck in this area.
And did you go to school around here too?
Yep, I went to Emmanuel in Boston.
Oh, excellent. And that's where you started some of those cartoons you mentioned that you pursued it afterwards?
Yep. I was kind of trying everything when I was in college, as far as like doing sketch comedy, stand-up comedy, comic strips, and it's just like similar to having 2 different comic strips running right now. It's just like I am not like satisfied until I get the idea out. Sometimes it's rushed, sometimes not, but I was like, whatever means this idea is best suited for, like that's how I want to deliver it.
And how often when I see 2 cats in one of your cartoons, how often are they your 2 cats? Always? Or sometimes?
I have 2 cats that are so different that like between the 2 of them, like I feel like I can cover every cat comic, because I have one cat that's scared of everything and one cat that's kind of fearless and a brat. So, excuse me. So yeah, 90% of the time, if it's two cats, yes, it's very inspired by my cats. But excuse me, I usually kind of by default, like the cat is kind of the cat and the dog is the dog. Like I still lean on those kind of generic's not the best word for it, but I lean on those personalities that we expect from those animals. Because like I said before, the it's easier to write a joke when you can go in with a character that the reader already has an idea about.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
Jumping back to the animals you use and the different species. What's
Sure.
your sort of for lack of a better word, your Borg process? Do you just jump on Google and look up different animals just to get what they look like and draw from that? Or are you just making it up out of your mind based on what animals look like?
I've drawn so many cats and dogs at this point, but like I usually draw a golden retriever that I can like get the basic drawings just from my head. And anytime I sketch in my sketchbook, I'm never looking at a reference. But when I come time to like actually finish a comic and make a digital version of it, yeah, I'll just Google. Like recent one I had to Google was beaver because I was looking at beavers. I drew my sketchbook and I was like, something about these look very wrong. And then I was like, oh, beavers don't really have a neck. And anyways, sometimes, yeah, I'm like drawing from memory and then I go and Google it and I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm trying to figure out like, what is it, the specific thing that I'm getting very wrong here. But with the cats and dogs, I'm like, I'll still look at reference pictures when I'm in the final stages of it. But for the most part, cats and dogs, I'm like just sketching.
It's awesome. Believe it or not, we are almost done. This is just flown by, but I want to make sure we get to before the end. You got to actually, speaking of Boston area, you've got a great event coming up with actually a frequent guest of ours. He's been on 2 or 3 times, Mark Parisi, who does the great panel Off the Mark.
Yeah.
It has for many years. Tell us a little bit about that event and how people can check that out, and also check out the rest of your work and get the book for that matter.
Sure. I will add to like Mark is great. This guy's super funny. His comic is great. One thing that I will add to is like every time I have an idea for a comic, first thing I do or second thing I do is Google to see who else, if that comic has been done. And it's like the worst possible, like it's the worst part of making a comic is thinking you have a great idea, Googling it, and someone did the same exact joke. And I will say that 9 out of 10 times when someone else did that joke, it was Mark. Like he's just done
He's
so
been
many.
doing it for 30 years.
Yeah,
He's
30
done it
years.
all.
So, but I have an idea for a joke, and I Google it, and I'm like, like half the time it's Mark that already did it. But he's great, and I'm really excited to be doing an event with him, and that is on Thursday, April 6th at 7 p.m. at the Harvard Bookstore in Harvard Square. So I'm going to be signing my new book there and doing a Q&A, and Mark and I are going to be chatting about comics, and it should be really fun because I met with him once and it was just like great conversation. It's like we both obviously love to talk about comic strips, and it should be a great time.
Yeah, and a great venue too. Love the Harvard Bookstore.
Yeah, super excited about that.
And in terms of finding your work online or elsewhere, where should people go?
If you just search They Can Talk on anything really, but mostly theycantalk.com, but Instagram and Facebook are the like primary places to find They Can Talk. I also publish exclusive comics on an app called Tiny View, where it's me and a couple of other really great cartoonists like Brian Gordon, who does Foul Language, and a couple of other cartoonists, but we have like exclusive stuff just on that app. And I actually do a comic a week on that app as well. So get one per week everywhere else, and then an additional one there. But yeah, just search They Can Talk. And the book is also called Are You Gonna Eat That? And it's in stores now, and Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your independent bookstores as well.
Awesome. Well, thank
I
you.
jumped on the, oh, I'm sorry. I jumped on the theycantalk.com website and it does hyperlink to these other avenues that you're discussing. So you have the avenue to Tiny View from that. So just
Cool.
an extra plug that people
Right.
can.
And of course, as always, we will be including links and some samples of Jimmy's work at petpeevescomic.com/podcast, where you'll also be able to download the podcast and watch us on video if you prefer to see our mugs rather than just listen to us. Don't do that in the car, though. We like to remind people just listen to us if you're driving. Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on Strip Search. This was great. It was so nice to catch up with you. And the book gets the Strip Search seal of approval. We encourage everybody to go out there and grab it. And otherwise, I guess we'll be seeing you all next month. Thanks again, Jimmy.
Thank you. This is great.